In the previous video, I discussed our journey of buying a house in Holland. I covered some of the processes like selecting the city, deciding if it's a good financial decision. Additionally, I covered which professionals we hired to help us with the mortgage application and the house hunting. If you haven't already, I highly recommend watching this video. It also contains some awkward sketches for your amusement. In this video, I will cover the remaining details such as obtaining the mortgage, getting the keys, doing all the paperwork, and also, of course, the total cost involved. For the mortgage purposes, we had to provide a bunch of documents to our mortgage advisor. First, of course, our IDs and passport. Second, completed questionnaires by their request. It has some bunch of different questions about your financial situation, working situation, etc. Our employment statement and contract. Employment statement is especially important if you're working on a temporary contract, which could be like 1 year or 2 years, or if you're working through the third-party company, which usually called payrolling company, which was the case for my wife. Basically, this statement says that the employer will planning to continue hiring you in the future, which of course banks want to hear. And of course, a lot of different financial documents such as salary slips, our taxes reports, our bank statements, etc, etc. Anything you can provide about your income or about you having some savings. Both the real estate agent and mortgage advisor provided a really convenient online portal where we can upload all the documents and even ask some questions right inside the portal. And we don't need to do a bunch of different email threads with different parties, just upload everything at one place and use it. Once we had uploaded everything, we scheduled a call with our mortgage advisor, and on this call he explained all the different options we have for our mortgage. After the discussion about different kinds of options, the mortgage advisor created a case and applied for a mortgage on behalf of us. It took around 2 to 3 weeks before we hear anything back from the bank, and we were approved. If the first bank had declined our application, the mortgage advisor would have continued to applying to different banks until he get a positive result. If we don't obtain the mortgage, we don't pay to him, so they also interested in your success. Additionally, we had to visit the mortgage advisor office one time because it's required by law to have at least one in-person meeting, I think to show the documents. You really bring the original documents or something like this. Otherwise, everything could be done and signed digitally. This meeting was actually quite useful. In person it was easier to ask all sorts of questions, and our advisor explained everything to us. And additionally, we also picked an insurances for the house in this meeting. Now let's talk a little bit about interest rates and different banks we have here in Holland. First, if you start checking online like lowest interest mortgage rates from banks in Netherlands, you will see some quite low numbers, but it's not necessarily a good idea to immediately apply to these banks with the lowest rates. Some of these banks maybe don't have any history, or they just recently started giving up mortgages, or maybe they're just some modern tech neo-bank startups which usually don't provide mortgage themselves but working as a proxy, so there's other company that providing the mortgage. The contract are you making with a mortgage company or a bank, it will last for 30 years, so I think it's quite important to pick some old establishing institutes, and you will be just reassured that they don't go bankrupt in a few years. Additionally, all these third parties and modern banks, they don't work with complicated cases or with expats, so they will just approve the simplest cases and decline everything else. More old established companies, they considered mortgages per case-to-case basis. For example, my wife working in a payrolling company, which banks don't like that much, and also we are originally from the country which currently under a huge pile of sanctions. So in our case, I think banks required to double check with European Union sanctions registers or something like this. With the smaller banks, we probably wouldn't get a mortgage at all. It's just not worth their time to do the proper research for our case. This is where hiring the mortgage advisor really pays off, because we would have never learned it by ourselves. Another important piece of information is something called NHG. I won't get into too many details, but it's a Dutch national mortgage guarantee. It usually means if something really goes wrong in the Dutch housing market, the government will cover some part of your losses. If you want to read up a little bit more, I will include some of the links in the description. But the most important, I think, is that NHG mortgages usually have lower interest rates than non-NHG mortgages, usually around 0.50% less. So our goal was to get this NHG mortgage. The only requirement is the house purchase, and it's changing year by the year. In 2023, it was 405,000 euro maximum house price that can be applied for this NHG mortgage. It's actually one of the reasons why it was the limit of the price we were looking for a house. Bank also have to approve for this NHG mortgage, and we get an approval through the mortgage advisor as well. Now let's talk a little bit about the type of insurances. You have to buy by law the house insurance, but there are other different options to add as well. The insurances we personally decided to pick is the main basic house insurance, which is required by law. Also all the belongings that are inside the house. Life insurance, in case one of us dies, the mortgage will be fully covered. And also liability insurance, in case we will damage the belongings of someone else. In addition to that, there is also a lawyer or legal insurance, which will cover the cost of the legal services if you need them, but legal services are quite expensive in Netherlands and insurance was as well, so we didn't purchase it. For all the insurances we pay 53 euro per month, and the legal insurance was also another 25 euro in addition if you're curious. After mortgage approval, we contacted our real estate agent and confirmed we got a mortgage and we will represent it on the key exchange. At the same time, the notary meeting should be arranged, and in our case, the real estate agent covered all of that and just pick the notary and arrange the meeting. The notary has also an online portal where you can see all the documents and also upload the documents required from you. Some of them were uploaded from our mortgage advisor, some from real estate agents, and some things we uploaded ourselves. But it was mostly filling some questionnaires and providing our personal documents, so it wasn't much. You never pay anything before this notary meeting at the end of the purchase, and all the financial process go through them, so you just get a full invoice with all the details what you're paying for, and they arrange the money for all the third parties. Except the one thing we paid ourselves beforehand, it's the technical inspection, because it was almost at the beginning of the process. You find them yourself and pay for it directly to the company. On the day of key exchange and also notary meeting at the same day, we went to Zwolle and actually met the previous owners for the first time. Inside the house we checked everything, but we actually made a mistake. I will tell you a little bit about this more later. Normally you also go to the notary with the previous owners and do all the paperwork and sign everything together and do the key exchange there. But in our case, owner already signed everything a couple of days beforehand, because I think he has some work to attend. They just give us a key and we went to notary by ourselves. At the notary, everything was really official. You go into the big room, there's a huge table in the center, notary representative sitting there, reading all the documents out loud to you in Dutch. I think it's a deed of purchase and also the contract you're making with the bank for the mortgage. Of course, if you don't speak Dutch, you have to hire a translator. It usually either to your native language or to English. In our case, it was to English. It was easier for us. I think notary representative actually speaks perfect English, as most Dutch people do, but it may be required by law to read everything in Dutch and not translate it, so you have to hire a translator. After going through all the documents, all the contracts, after we agreed to everything and signed everything, it was it. We became homeowners. It was actually quite emotional, I would say. Now finally, let's get to all the costs. I know from the previous video many people asked me about these, how much it all costs. So let's get through it. So first of all, our house costs 380,000 euro. This is the most important and of course the biggest one. The house price on the listing was actually 385, but we managed to get it down to 350, which is quite a rare case, especially in the bigger cities. Usually you have to overpay or overbid on the house. For the house, we got a mortgage for 30 years with 10-year fixed interest rates, and interest rate is 4.12%. You can actually change this interest rate if it goes down too low. There's a special fee to pay for that, but sometimes the interest rates go low so much, so it makes sense to pay this fee and change the interest rate. Otherwise, in 10 years, it will be recalculated automatically. Then transfer cost is one of the biggest costs when buying a house, and it's 2% of the purchase price. But if you are younger than 30 years old, there is a special program in the Netherlands, you don't pay this transfer tax. In our case, my wife is younger than 30 years old, so we only paid half of this transfer cost, 3,800 euro. NHG Mortgage also has additional one-time fee, which is 0.6% of the purchase price of the house. In our case, it was 2,280 euro, but lower interest rates to 0.5% absolutely worth the cost in the long run. Notary services are also cost money. There are a huge list of different kind of services they provide, but in total we paid 1,299 euro. You can't opt out from this price. And our mortgage broker or advisor services cost us 3,000 euro, which I think pretty standard fee. Also, there's appraisal cost. It's for the mortgage to get the right price for the house. It costs us 695 euro. It's also non-optional cost. And translator costs us 285 euro. This is only if you don't speak Dutch very well. In total, we paid at notary 11,359 euro, and before that we also paid 350 euro to technical inspector, so in total buying a house cost us 11,709 euro. You may notice that I didn't list a real estate agent here, and the reason is because our house was actually listed from the agency of our real estate agent. In theory, we should have picked another real estate agent, but I think we had some rapport with this person, and they helped us a lot during the purchase anyway, and we decided just go without a real estate agent and just ask some questions if we need them. There is also a different cost of owning a house, but it will be a separate video about this. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss it. And the last part I wanted to mention a little bit, it's what went wrong with our purchase. I already mentioned it in my vlog where I've been moving from one city to another. You can watch it by the link in the description. Anyway, after we moved in, we immediately noticed an issue with the leakage. So actually this ceiling was leaking when you're turning on the water on the second floor in the shower, and the place of leakage of course right under where the shower is located. It was an unpleasant surprise. Of course, we immediately contacted the real estate agent and the previous owner as well, but they say they don't know about this issue and it's nothing to do with them. But in my opinion, and we also got a confirmation a little bit later from the inspector that they knew about this issue, they just hide it. But because we didn't have any lawyer insurance, we decided didn't pursue this issue and try to fix it ourselves. First, of course, we went to the insurance company that cover all the house problems, and they sent us an inspector and they investigated the issue a little bit, and unfortunately the conclusion was that it's because of the poor maintenance that happened, so it's not covered by the insurance. The inspector visit though was free, but they agreed to cover the consequences. So after we fix this issue ourselves or with some third-party company, they will send us a special person who will paint, I think, the ceiling, because it's the only consequence we have from this leakage. It's a little yellow stamp on the ceiling. This painter's company actually coming today. I don't think I'm gonna do it another video about this, but follow me on Instagram and you can see how it all resolved. Eventually we hired just a contractor company. They came, and originally they proposed to completely replace all the tiles in the bathroom because there was some issue with drainage installation and you need to reapply all the tiles because the drainage wasn't high enough. You need a different one, etc, etc. And of course it was a really bad surprise for us because the cost of such work would be really high. I think around maybe 5,000 euro or something like this. But eventually they found a solution and they just reapplied the insulation again around the drainage system and around the shower cabin. They actually give us even the warranty for like 10 years it should work, and so far it works pretty well. I think it's been a couple of months already and it's not leaking at all. It only cost us around 250 euros, so we're quite happy how everything turned out. My advice for you, if you're purchasing a house, please check everything thoroughly on the day of the key exchange. turn the water for some extensive amount of time, check all the leakages, all the floors, all the walls, turn on the shower and bathroom, flush all the toilets of course, maybe even turn on the heating system, check if it's working. Maybe it's a good idea to check everything related to electricity as well, like sockets and light switches, but of course it's not always possible because our house, for example, was without a light bulbs, but at least the sockets you can check. I think it's a pretty smart thing to do, so don't fall into this happy buyer house mood and check everything thoroughly so you don't have to pay for it later. That's it from me, guys. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Also check my other videos about housing in Netherlands here, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.